Hello friends, welcome to my channel Sushant Chess Wise. Today we are at the next topic, that is the knight versus pawns, and we have got a very tricky position today. Before we go into the details of the position, we will try to understand what we are trying to achieve from this. We are going to focus on two rules here. Whenever the knight approaches, the king will try to be diagonally one step away from the knight, or it will try to be two steps away from the knight. That blocks many of the squares where the knight is trying to approach. Another factor is very particular in this position. White aims to go to the h2 square, and for that we see there are two places, f1 and g4, and to reach f1 and g4 there are a few places like e5, e3 and d2. Knowing these factors, we will be covering up the position. I'll try to show you what is the way for white to play and draw the game. The knight wants to reach the pawn, so of course first move knight b4, very important. The knight is trying to reach the e5 square. So for that we know it can reach only from the square c6. So black goes h5 without wasting any time. Now knight c2 check is blunder. After knight c2, this time far better than king e4 is king f2. We see the knight's path is blocked. The e1 and the e3 square are covered, and knight d4, h4, knight f5, h3 is too slow. And if the knight tries to give a check, let's say from knight a3, h4, knight c4, h3, knight e5, trying to arrange the check from g4 square. Again black uses the technique kg3. The king comes diagonally one square away, and we see that now the knight is a move or two short. h2 and h1 comes by force. Also we should note at this point that the move ke4, which is diagonally one square away from the knight, doesn't work over here because of knight a3. Good move. The knight is heading to c4, h4, knight c4, and we see that black is unable to control e5 and the d2 squares both. And after h3, knight d2 check, followed by the king's entry to f1 and the h2 squares. This we have discussed before. Just I will show you once again. After king f4, knight f1, kf3, knight h2, kg2, knight g4, kg3, knight e3. This is the drawing technique. h2 allows knight f1 check, and knight can be given up for the pawn. Thus after h5, the only good attempt is knight c6. Let's discuss the move knight d5 as well. Knight d5, then obviously king f3, and again we see the white knight is struggling. Knight e7, h4, knight g6, h3, knight e5 check, and king goes to g3. Simply again diagonally one square away, and knight falls short. All these techniques are very important from the knight endgame point of view, because in knight endgame, side having extra pawn is many a times able to sack the knight and create a situation with pass pawn versus knight. Same is applicable for the defending knight also. He can also try to sacrifice the knight. That time both have to know these kind of positions or the ideas. After knight c6, again black has to be very careful. The knight is coming to e5. So move like h4 would be really hasty. It will allow the knight to reach its destination. After knight e5, h3, knight g4 check, and the knight reaches the h2 square. King f4 of course allows ng6 followed by nh4. ke4, and this is a very critical position. Finding the move is absolutely impossible here if we can't find the route for the knight, which we have discussed before. So the knight wants to reach g4 or the f1 squares, for which the knight has to dodge the squares which are close to the black king, and white has the strong move knight a5. This is the only way in this position. That is why the study positions are many a times considered absurd, like they are not going to come in the games. Why to go for them? Why to study them? But the unique idea can be useful, and these positions are very much idea based and they can occur in actual games as well. After knight d8, black again uses the same technique, h4, knight e6, king f5, knight d4 check. The knight is trying to come towards the pawn, but black goes kg4, and we see the knight's route is totally blocked. After knight e2, there is h3, and after knight c2, which is very useful in many cases, we see knight e3 and knight f1 coming up. What can black do? Of course, h3 allows knight e3 check, kg3, knight f1, and the position will repeat. King f3 will again allow knight d4 check. Of course, black goes for king f4, and after knight e1, h3, knight d3 check, king again goes to g3, controlling the f2 and the f4 squares, and black will win over here. So knight a5 forced, h4, and the knight comes to c4. And finally we realize that now white's task is looking very easy. The knight is heading to d2 and the f1 squares. Black has a final try. Instant h3 would allow knight d2 followed by knight f1, drawing the game. So king f3, setting a small trap. Knight e5 and knight d2 checks are available. Both look similar, only one of them works. The move knight d2, which was looking good because knight wants to come to f1, black has the strong move ke2. kg2, which also seems to work, unfortunately fails in this case because of the maneuver knight c4, h3, knight e3 check. When we see that black is unable to control both g4 and the f1 squares. Once we understand these four elements in the position, we get a lot of insight about knight versus rook pawn cases. The knight e5 check, kg3, and the same technique, knight c4. And black has nothing better than repeating the moves, because after h3 there is knight e3, and we again see h2 just allows knight f1, king f3 also allows knight f1, and other moves will allow knight g4. So after king f2 there is of course knight g4, and the game is drawn. It was a very complicated study by Grigoriev, but I hope the points which I have mentioned, they will be not only useful in solving this study, but actually in night end games when we play our games. I hope you are finding these lessons useful. Do like, share and subscribe the channel. Thanks for your time.